Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stoliarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stoliarov II, and I'm the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Right now, we have a panel of U.S. Transhumanist Party members and officers. We have our Director of Applied Innovation, David Shoemaker. We have our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia. We have our members, Brent Ellman and Jason Gehringer. And we hope that some other panelists will join us a bit later in the salon, along with the guest whom we invited, Neal VanDeRee. But in the meantime, I want to introduce the subject of today's conversation, which is the Church of Perpetual Life, of which Neal VanDeRee is the officiator. And I have linked to the website of the Church of Perpetual Life in the YouTube chat. The mission of the Church of Perpetual Life is, quote, to assist all people in the radical extension of healthy human life and to provide fellowship for longevity enthusiasts through regular holiday and memorial services. And I will say, from a personal standpoint, I met Neal for the first time in 2014 in Piedmont, California, at the second Transhuman Visions conference that was organized by Hank Pellissier. And when I met Neal, I introduced myself as the author of Death is Wrong, the illustrated children's book of indefinite life extension, the first illustrated children's book to cover that subject. And Neal was quite receptive, quite enthusiastic about the book. And he offered me the opportunity to enter into a drawing for an ancient Roman coin, which I ended up winning. So this is the Roman coin that I'm holding right now. I have had it now for close to 7 years. And upon receiving it, I did some research about its origins. This coin was minted in the 330s CE during the reign of the Emperor Constantine. And it was minted in the region that was called Sicily at the time. It's part of Croatia today. But it happens to be the oldest object that I own. And prior to that, in Death is Wrong, I described how when I was essentially hunting for coins as a high school student, I found on the floor of my high school an old 1893 Indian head penny that was at that time the oldest object that I had owned. But after getting in contact with Neal and entering this drawing that he hosted, the oldest object that I owned became a lot older. But what's fascinating too is that both of those coins that I described are older now than any human being who is alive today. And that should lead us to pause a bit and reflect, because what a tragedy it is that every single person who was alive when these coins were created is alive no longer. So the purpose of the movement for indefinite life extension is to try to do something about that. Now, I will also point out the Church of Perpetual Life is not a denominational church. It's not a theistic church. So somebody who is an atheist, secularist, humanist, and agnostic would not find any conflicts with his or her beliefs with regard to that organization. Really, as I understand it, the Church of Perpetual Life exists to hold weekly events that inform people about progress and the science of life extension, as well as the philosophical ideas behind it. And there are frequent guests who are advocates for longevity, including political advocates. Zoltan Istvan came to the Church of Perpetual Life during his 2015 Immortality Bus tour. So this is a physical venue that, of course, in non-pandemic times, serves as a gathering place, as a way for transhumanists to establish a community, especially in Florida, where there is a fairly large concentration of transhumanists. It's interesting too, Mike Lazine points out in the chat that there are a number of trees in California that are older than many Americans. He thinks it's very annoying that there are trees that can live older than we do. In fact, the oldest tree is a bristlecone pine tree somewhere in California. Its exact location is not disclosed for safety reasons, but it is called the Methuselah Tree. It's now more than 5,000 years old. And that tree also features in Death is Wrong. Actually, let me correct that. The Methuselah Tree is 4,852 years old. There was another tree that was discovered in 2010 that was 5,062 years old at that time, so it must be 5,073 years old today. But both of those trees are in California in the bristlecone pine forest over there. So that may be a place to visit for those who are enthusiasts of long-lived organisms. But the point that I took away from that and expressed when writing Death is Wrong is, if it's possible for those trees, why shouldn't it be possible, at least in principle, for humans? So while we're waiting for our guest, I would like to invite thoughts from the panel about the subject of transhumanism and particularly communities built around transhumanism. So the Church of Perpetual Life calls itself a church, but do you think it has really primarily just harnessed the community aspects that churches typically offer without the theology that many churches espouse? I invite anyone to offer thoughts on that question.
Well, I think it makes for a great place to socialize, to do the functions that a lot of churches do, right? Bring people together around some common ideas. You can share common values. You can reinforce each other. Maybe, who knows, provide guidance or even monetary help to one another. So I do see a lot of overlap in that area. It also, I think, helps from a traditional aspect. We humans are creatures of habit. At least I will confess to being one. So if you're used to having a meeting on a periodic basis and getting together, with like minds, then something like a church is probably a good model to go after as far as that's concerned. So there's a couple of thoughts. Someone else?
Well, I would just wonder if transhumanism could qualify as a religion. I mean, if you looked at the definition, would it qualify? And I think a big problem with it is that both humanism and transhumanism, inherent in its philosophy, is not this idea of some larger than us being that we need to worship and So if your definition of religion is that there is some sort of higher being or creator, then I don't know if then transhumanism would apply to that. What do you think?
Yes, I agree with you, Jason. It seems to me that in the definition of religion, there is necessarily some sort of superhuman, supernatural entity that controls the dynamics of the universe and of life in some way. It could be very direct or it could be very detached. Like there are some religious individuals who are deists who say that God set the laws of nature in motion and then left the universe alone. Or Aristotle, for example, believed that God was so perfect that his only possible perfect action was to contemplate his or its own perfection. And so God did not get involved in everyday matters. But of course, even those views are very different from traditional religion. I personally don't see how you can have a religion without having some sort of supernatural entity that controls some aspect of existence. Without that, you can have a philosophy, you can have an ideology, and religions are a subset of philosophy. But I don't think you can have a religion, and transhumanism doesn't posit a higher power, a supernatural controlling force. Therefore, I don't think transhumanism per se is a religion, but there can be religious people who are also transhumanists. We need to have conversations about these general subjects and be open to a multiplicity of perspectives and ideas and arguments all within this big tent framework. And indeed, one aspect that does set transhumanism apart from a lot of movements is that we do not have a set of dogmas. We do have some core ideals. We have positions in the US Transhumanist Party platform, but even say the platform positions are voted on by our members, and they are subject to the possibility of amendment in the future. And any idea can be discussed. It's not off limits as long as the discussion is civil and constructive. And I wonder, with regard to what Brent said, is a lot of the boundary between what is religion and what is not religion perhaps a matter of self-definition. If a person or an entity puts forth a reasonable case for why that person or entity can be considered as engaging in a religious action, perhaps there should be some deference given to that interpretation. Whereas if someone says, no, what I'm doing is not a religion, then a similar degree of recognition of that position should be provided as well. Because it is the case, sometimes people, particularly those of a fundamentalist religious persuasion, will use the argument that, oh, what you're saying is just another set of religious beliefs, as a way to kind of even the playing field between positions that really don't have the same level of support, say between young earth creationism and the theory of evolution. A lot of young earth creationists will say not just that atheism is a religion, but they will say evolution is a religion, and the premises and positions of those who consider evolution to be true are equivalent in some metaphysical sense to the premises and positions of those who support young earth creationism. And I say that as one who recognizes that there's overwhelming empirical evidence in favor of evolution and virtually none in favor of young earth creationism. So I don't think even most religious people, most Christians will say that the earth is 6,000 years old. I think most Christians at this point, including prominent figures like Pope Francis, for example, have come to the understanding that the book of Genesis has to be interpreted in a metaphorical way that would be compatible with evolution. So it does seem like the advocates of evolution have a lot more evidence in favor of their arguments than the advocates of young earth creationism. And the two positions shouldn't be considered equivalent or competing on the same level.
Yeah, well, domain is important too. And what I mean by that is that, let me start with science first. So I'm very interested in science. I use science empirical evidence to help me form what I believe. So those become my belief statements until something better comes along. But science has a domain that it works in too. First off, whatever it is that I want to test must be falsifiable. If it's not falsifiable, then it's not in the domain of science. If I can't prove something's not true, I can't prove, therefore, that it is true. So if I try to take science and disprove something in somebody else's religion that's not falsifiable, it's not valid. It's not valid for science to do. And the converse of that is the same. So somebody saying, we take the moral stories, we take these stories from any scriptural text and then try to treat them as if they were a scientific journal, they are out of their domain as well. So everybody needs to stay in their lane. And then I think we would have much less of this, but the overreach can be a real problem.
This reminds me of the Stephen Jay Gould concept of non-overlapping magisteria between science and religion. Stephen Jay Gould was an evolutionary biologist who originated the concept of punctuated equilibrium, and his position was essentially religion doesn't have anything to say on scientific questions. Science doesn't have anything to say on religious questions. But that in itself is a relatively new type of outlook, in the sense that, say, in the 16th century, the Roman Catholic Church in Europe was claiming a lot of positions about the physical world, even to the point of espousing a geocentric view of the universe. And Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake for disagreeing with that. Galileo had to recant the heliocentric model officially in order to have his life be spared. So I think we've seen essentially the understanding of these distinct spheres change considerably, evolve considerably over time in a favorable direction. I would rather have the non-overlapping magisteria concept than a church saying that the content of a particular text should dictate what we may or may not posit about the physical world.
Yeah, I think the Pope came out and said something about aliens being other children of God or something. So even the Pope is, hedging his bets.
Well, it's an interesting question for the Catholic Church to address. If there are other life forms, and it's conceivable that there would be, especially if natural selection and evolution are indeed true, which we essentially know that they are, then what would be the theological status of those entities? That's actually a more challenging question for a long-established church to wrestle with than for us, whether we are atheist transhumanists or religious transhumanists, because we do tend to have essentially less of a fixed set of texts and precedents by which we would evaluate that question. So
yeah, transhumanists are used to tech moving fast, and there's new stuff happening. All of that's not impossible no more. Oh, okay, well, it's Tuesday,
Also, on the topic of extraterrestrial religions, there's actually Raelism. And Raelism, they worship Ra and El. And it's really strange because Ra, obviously, is part of the Egyptian beliefs, and El plays into this concept of Elohim that is part of Judaism and Christianity. And, it's a giant rabbit hole.
And there are different positions on whether and how humans should try to make contact with extraterrestrial life forms. Of course, there's the SETI project, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which has been underway for several decades. On the other hand, Stephen Hawking was opposed to trying to contact extraterrestrial life forms because he was of the view that if they existed, they were more likely to be some sort of a malignant expansionist empire type of civilization.
That's a good point, though. I thought, because we, usually if a being is going to evolve to that point, they're probably a predator.
Well, I don't think I would agree with that, though, because of the view that I hold that greater intelligence tends to at least correlate with greater morality. As civilizations progress technologically, they also tend to adopt more enlightened outlooks, more cosmopolitan outlooks and positions. As David mentioned, for instance, the Europeans who colonized the New World in the 16th century were pre-Enlightenment, essentially. The Age of Enlightenment began to occur in the Western world in the mid-17th century and really flourished in the 18th century. So the Spanish conquistadors were not enlightened. They did find certain practices, for instance, human sacrifice, that they found to be abhorrent from their standpoint. And I would agree with their reaction and the abolition of human sacrifice that they brought about. However, they also had this regrettable view that essentially the people whom they encountered were less human than they and needed a special kind of rather forceful conversion or harnessing as labor, for instance, which I don't think most people today or most governments today would engage in. So there has been progress within our civilization. Humans have abolished slavery. There's still some slavery in the world today, but it's illegal now. Humans have abolished serfdom. Humans have abolished racial and ethnic discrimination in most places in the world. There is universal suffrage in many countries in the world, unless they're authoritarian. But there is a far more inclusive and tolerant outlook just 500 years later. And I think if we do encounter a civilization that has had even tens of thousands more years to advance than ours has, we would also encounter, generally speaking, a far more cosmopolitan and enlightened and peaceful outlook. And I do think a prime directive type of situation is more likely than a conquest type of situation.
I wanted to comment on Gennadi's coin, his Roman coin from about 330, I think you said it was. Council of Nicaea was in 325 AD, and that was the canonizing of the Christian scriptures. So when you look at that coin and you think about that, and you think about people who use that coin in some type of transaction, they were going on at the very foundation of this codifying of which books made it into the Christian Bible and which books that didn't. And I don't know, there's something kind of interesting about that to me.
Yeah, so it's fascinating that right now I am holding what those people would have used as an instrument of monetary exchange. And yes, these kinds of questions were definitely on their minds. And I do wonder uh, how many of them essentially would have even considered, well, what is going to happen with these ideas, as well as even the objects of their world, like this coin that I'm holding right now, in another 1700 years. Did that thought cross the minds of the users of this coin, of whom there would have been many, most likely, at that time? And this is one aspect of history that I think is important to keep in mind as well. We don't know the vast majority of what happened in the past. We know some of the most salient events. We know some of the key characters who played some sort of notable, memorable role. But the vast majority of people who ever lived, they haven't left any sort of trace in terms of writings about them, in terms of archaeological evidence, and even with what evidence they left, we aren't able to reconstruct a full account of their lives. For the fortunate among those people, we might have their names, we might have approximate dates of their lives or their professions, but we don't know what they did on January 5th, 334 CE, and what their thoughts were about the Council of Nicaea, which was a relatively recent phenomenon at that time, where they stood on Christianity versus paganism, what they thought about the Emperor Constantine, all of that. Right now, a lot more information is captured about each of our activities. One, we voluntarily disclose a lot more information on social media. Two, we do have generally a far more literate culture. So much more is written about any given person. Any given person has a much greater probability of having some sort of historical record about themselves being generated by others. And of course, in the course of daily life, we all leave traces of data through our transactions, through our interactions with government agencies or private companies. And all of that does allow people to have a much clearer understanding of who we are and what we stand for. And we have been joined by our guest, Neal VanDeRee. So welcome, Neal. We have been discussing at some length what a religion is and what a church is or can be under US law, and where the boundary is exactly between religious and non-religious belief systems. But I think now is a good opportunity to ask you to introduce the Church of Perpetual Life, talk a bit about its history and your role within it as the officiator. I still have the Roman coin that we were discussing as well from the 330s CE.
Yes, very good, Gennady. So yes, I'm the officiator at the Church of Perpetual Life. It's my honor to have services there once a month, and our services consist of a new lesson on, or some sort of a presentation on ways to reverse human aging or extend healthy human lifespan to an unlimited state. That's our goal, that's our wish. So I guess we are the only brick and mortar transhumanist church that I'm aware of in the world. And of course, we live stream our events and we reach out to other people, and we're very happy to be joined by people for every service. And the founding of the church was created by Bill Falloon and Saul Kent Back in 2013, we had our first service, and since then we've been growing and growing, and we are espousing any method that will help us to reach a state of an unlimited lifespan. It's my personal goal to be 500 years and look much younger. That's my personal goal, and for all of the members of our church. Yes.
Yes, indeed. And you and I met in March of 2014 in Piedmont, California. That's when I entered the drawing to win this coin. So back then, the Church of Perpetual Life was quite a new organization. And you explained at that time that it's a non-denominational church. It doesn't really require any specific theology or belief system for the attendees, just an interest in overcoming biological aging and learning about ways to do that.
Yes, that's exactly right. We were at the RadFest, were we?
Yes.
It's the RadFest, as I recall. Yes. And hey, I love the shirt there. That's wonderful, David.
And even prior to the RadFest, we met at the Transhuman Visions Conference that was hosted by Hank Pellissier.
That's right, up there near San Francisco. And that was a fun event. And you know, anytime you meet a group of transhumanists, you're in good company. You always get something for it. I get charged up. I get new ideas. It's a great experience. The work that you're doing for the Transhumanist Party is fantastic. So I want to encourage you to keep up the great work that you're doing.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. So since that time, how has the Church of Perpetual Life been able to develop? And I think it would be interesting for our viewers to know both about your activities before the pandemic as well as how the pandemic has affected them.
Sure. Like answering that question first, the pandemic has caused us to not have meetings in person, but rather to be meeting in virtually, just like so many people are. So we're doing that. We were always live streaming before that, but now that's really all that we do. We don't meet in person. Before though, and soon when we get back to a normal state, we will have our services in person. What we do is we have an hour of family time, if you will, where everybody gets to meet and greet and see each other that they haven't seen in a month. And we break bread, have a little snack, talk about anything that is transhumanist, anything that is an unlimited lifespan conversation, things like that, ways to improve our health currently. Then we go to have the service, we have the presentation, and I'm very lucky to have Bill Falloon continually giving presentations and updates on age reversal and the work that they're doing in different groups around the state, around the country. And we have the main speaker, whoever that may be, a guest speaker. And then we have a full dinner afterwards. We have an open full bar and people talk into the night. Conversations have gone on until 2 o'clock in the morning. And for me, that's a long time because I usually get to sleep around 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, but now I don't. My schedules have changed. But it's a great welcoming of all of the transhumanists in South Florida and from all over. We have people come, they'll drive 8-10 hours to get to our service and then stay over at a hotel that night. It's a wonderful thing. Our growth has been exponential. We've gone from at our second service, we had maybe 4 or 5 people, and now we fill the church. We may need to be getting a bigger building because we've got, we're running out of space. So we're in a large 2-story, 8,500 square foot building, but we've gone beyond that capacity. And then online, typically our services will get 1,000 views within the period of a month, which is great. So we're reaching people all over the world, Australia, in Europe, in Asia, of course, all over the country. And it's great to be able to connect people, but not a month goes by that I don't have somebody that says, is there a Church of Perpetual Life in Chicago, in San Francisco, in New York? I want to go to it. And of course, we're the only ones. So we encourage all of these people all over the place to create meetups where they can invite their friends and families and stuff to come to the events, watch the live streamings together, do a potluck or whatever, meet at a restaurant. And I know that some of those groups are starting to pop up around the country, around the world. So it's a great thing to be involved in the dynamics of this church. It's really tremendous. And I'd like to share with you, if I could, Gennady, the creed of the Church of Perpetual Life. So our creed is the Perpetual Life Creed. We believe that all life is sacred and that we have been given this one life to make unlimited. We believe in our Creator's divine plan for all of humanity to have infinite lifespans in perfect health and eternal joy, rendering death to be optional. By following our gospel, we achieve eternal life, creating a heaven here on earth. We follow Nikolai Fedorov, who taught that the transcendence of the Creator will only be solved when humanity, in our unified efforts, become an instrument of universal resuscitation, when the divine word becomes our divine action. We can't just talk about, well, let me continue on, but just to say one thing, we can't just talk about what we want, we have to act, we've got to do things, we've got to get things done. We follow Arthur C. Clarke, who said that the only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. And so we enter each day energized in spirit and empowered by the words of our prophets to live in joy, serving our Creator and all of mankind forever and ever. And that's our creed at Perpetual Life.
Excellent. And thank you for sharing that with us, Neal. David, do you have some thoughts on this?
Well, yeah. One of the things I want to say, Neal, and by the way, good to see you again,
You too.
is one of the side benefits of the pandemic, I guess, has been the streaming. Now, I know that you streamed before the pandemic, but I've become so accustomed to now dealing with so many things for that Susan and I have found it, to where we make more of your virtual events than we did before. So I'm hoping that that's another avenue for you as far as expansion is concerned. I love the different guests that you have on, and it's always good to hear Bill be so passionate about those updates that for longevity. So thanks for the great work, and I like to point out the positive side of some of this pandemic fallout, if you will.
Yeah, with all this going on, there are some positives, and you're right, that is one. Another is people I think, are much more focused on their own personal health. For the pandemic, health would just be taken for granted and be an afterthought. Now people are focused on it. Focus comes a certain amount of focus, I believe, on their potential mortality and the potential for them to potentially be an unlimited lifespan or live longer in a longer health span. So these are things that I'd love to see more people discussing. That's what's happening now. And that I think is another, if you would, side benefit of this awful pandemic, And Gennady, you had mentioned that we are a non-denominational church. We even go beyond that a bit. I think I sometimes call us a supplemental church because we have members who are Jewish, who are Christian, who are atheist, who are agnostic, who are Buddhist, and all these people from all these faiths come together with the realization that maybe we can extend our life to be 150, 200, 250 years in great health. And so it's a wonderful thing to be able to look at the different religions and pick out what's the best of them, what's best for humanity, and to bring those things together and coalesce those into a transhumanist church.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And actually, one of the comments I had made before you joined is that transhumanism is broader than any single religion or ideology, precisely because it can encompass people of that range of beliefs and other beliefs as well, and lead them to see the value in supporting the reversal of biological aging, the attainment of indefinite life extension, and the curing of diseases. And this is an aspect of our movement that helps make it a big tent, helps make it welcoming to people of a variety of backgrounds, because we can all share this goal, irrespective of our specific theologies and worldviews, as long as we're open-minded enough to consider that science can alleviate a lot of these obstacles to our health and longevity that exist today. Now, I was also curious to ask you with regard to the community building aspect of the Church of Perpetual Life. Was this one of the main motivations for utilizing a church format, essentially, to have people gather and not just attend the presentations, but also meet one another and develop greater connections that way with people who have some similarities in terms of shared goals, shared desires to live longer and healthier?
Yes, surely, surely that's part of it. And it goes beyond being like members of a club. It's more of a family feeling being in the Church of Perpetual Life. People who come, the way I see it, when I'm 500 years old, these people who are members of the Church of Perpetual Life, those people who acknowledge that they are immortalists seeking a way to live an unlimited lifespan, these are people we are going to be friends with and family, if you will, that closely knit family, and we're together that way in this church. That's right.
Yes, indeed. And we have Jose Cordero in our YouTube chat. He is quite fond of the talks that you host at the Church of Perpetual Life, and he's wondering, whom do you have lined up for your next talks? He also recommends a few individuals, Andrew Steele, who is the author of the book Ageless, as well as Jean Hébert, who wrote another fantastic book in Jose's view called Replacing Aging.
Yes. Well, I want to acknowledge that we've actually reached out to Andrew Steele and Jose. If you could touch base with him, we'd love to have Andrew Steele as a person to give a presentation at the church. We've got a couple of other authors lined up. Bill Falloon is currently our speaker scheduled for this month in March, but it's possible we'll get a second speaker, a couple of people that I'm talking to. In the past, we've had Jose speak at the church. We've had Martine Rothblatt, we've had Aubrey de Grey. Aubrey, actually, that's an interesting thing. Aubrey and I were friends before the church was being formed, and he was the one who introduced me to Bill Falloon to recommend me as the officiator, the officiator of the church, to be able to run the church. So I want to thank again Aubrey for connecting me with Bill, and always thank Bill for doing all that he's doing in age reversal things, and of course the work that he's done to create the Church of Perpetual Life. But we'd love to have actually, Jose, I'll shout out to you. We'd love to have you come back, and since we're doing things live streaming, even though you're in Spain or somewhere in Europe, we'll Zoom you in sometime. And perhaps we should have several of you folks as well to join us. Gennady, it would be great to have you. We're a non-political church. We did have a couple of people who were running for different parts of the government, the different candidates over the years give talks, but we don't ever say you should vote for this person and you should vote for that person. We stay out of that. People can make their own minds up about that. We're solely focused on doing all that we can to increase our lifespan and health spans.
Yes, indeed. So thank you for that invitation, Neal, and I would be happy to speak at one of your future events, and I would recommend it to the others on this panel as well. Now, I recall you hosted Zoltan Istvan back in 2015 when he did his Immortality Bus tour.
Yes, he was there. Zoltan is such a dynamic guy, and it was great to have Zoltan speak. And he spoke the same night as Polly, can't remember how to say her last name, but Polly gave a presentation, and he brought the Immortality Bus with Rowan, and we allowed them to stay at the church, and I was fortunate enough to ride the Immortality Bus up to the ashram that Martine Rothblatt has up the coast here. There may be 4.5 hours north of us, and met with some folks over there, and it was a great trip. And that was his promotional tour of the country, promoting transhumanism all over the country, was really quite good, and got some great media, and really, it was really a good start to things back then.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. And of course, Zoltan's appearance at the Church of Perpetual Life is quite memorable within the history of the US Transhumanist Party. And you also mentioned Martine Rothblatt and the Terasem movement. And Terasem is another transhumanist religion. Do you maintain frequent communications with them?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're great folks. Martine and Gabriel and the whole group, they're great people, and we're happy to be in connection with them. And I went to their service. They have their service on the 10th of every month, and I was at the service in January. And I encourage you, it's coming up here in a few days. If you haven't been to one, it's worth getting together with those folks and talking with them. Terasem also has an interesting thing where they allow the members to every day do a diary, if you will, to connect to forever save what's going on in your life. It connects to your social media, to your Facebook page, to your Twitter, whatever. It will save all of those posts forever in their cloud. It's a personal cloud, if you will. And they have a test, the Terasems have this test you will take, a psychological profile, and that psychological profile then is sort of 95% of who you are. All these questions that you answer, and if you become a Terasem, you can get involved with part of that. And as a cryonicist, I think that's a good idea to have a backup of your memory in that way. So, yeah.
Yes, indeed. So, yes, it's good to have confirmation that there are indeed close communications between the Church of Perpetual Life and Terasem. And these are just examples of the currents of thought that are emerging under the broader umbrella of transhumanism. And of course, Bill Falloon himself is quite a prolific speaker. Every time I hear him speak, it seems that he has a new or updated set of slides covering the most recent developments in longevity. I actually think it would be a good idea to have him as our guest here for a future virtual Enlightenment Salon and give him the opportunity to go fully through his most recent slide deck, because it does seem like he has to rush through them sometimes because he has so much information. But it would be interesting if he could actually deliver his full version of his presentation. And I don't know how long that would take, but we would have the time for that.
I will certainly connect you with Bill and see if he can't do that. I know he's a super busy man, as you can imagine. But the interesting thing about his presentation is every month it changes. So when I'm sure someday he'll be able to come and speak here at your forum, but whatever presentation he gives, that's going to be the age reversal information that we have at that time. And then a month from now, we're evolving, together to better ways of reversing aging. So I'll be very happy to connect you on that. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Neal. And thank you also for helping to distribute copies of Death is Wrong back
Yes.
when I published it in 2013 and held the fundraiser to provide more than 1,000 free copies of Children. The Church of Perpetual Life was one of the recipients of the books that were then distributed to people. So that is a great venue that you have there. And do you find a lot of younger people who are now starting to take an interest in transhumanism and life extension?
Yes, Gennady, we do. And again, I want to thank you for those donations of those books that you gave Perpetual Life. Those have been distributed throughout the families and children of the church. And they're all over the state, even all over the world. Some people that came in. And we have a library at the church where your books, we have a couple of those copies we kept and are part of our library. but it's a remarkable book, actually, and something that's really basically gets to the bottom of things very easily. And it's if somebody says, well, what's transhumanism? What is that? Well, or the concept of death being wrong is very well said in that book, and it's something that everybody can understand. It's very well written. So the people at the Church of Perpetual Life, there are many families, there are many young people that are, I think, embracing the concept of a life that's unlimited. I find people coming out of college now, some of them think, oh, there are already people who are living 300, 400 years, or there should be. It's something that is, just 10 years ago, it was like the crazy idea that you should be able to live to be 200. But now it's universally accepted, I think, by most young people coming out of college. And this is one of the reasons I have great faith in humanity to find a way to reverse aging, to find a way for us to be able to live an unlimited lifespan. So many people are coming out with a positive expectation, the positive expectation of that happening, of that, a sense of that's where we are going with our evolution. That's where the human species is headed. And so we all have to continue to work together, support that research that's going on, and those who are working on the research of reversing human aging. But I see that happening for us, Gennady. I see that happening for all of us in our lifetime. So I want to invite all of you to my 500th birthday party. It'll be at Perpetual Life. You all are welcome to come, and it'll be a great celebration in the future.
Well, I accept your invitation, Neal. I will be in the late 400s myself at that time. But the interesting thing is when you're 500, some people will be older than 500, some people will be a little younger than 500. But for all of us who make it to that point in time, really age will become just a number, because we will have to be biologically youthful and healthy and free from the debilitating conditions which are what shorten life as a person ages today.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So now that we've had a great overview of the Church of Perpetual Life, we have a question from Brent Ellman about what perhaps is one of the most formidable obstacles to the progress of life extension research in the United States, and that is the Food and Drug Administration and the overly restrictive classifications that it employs with regard to what it would approve a drug or a medical treatment for. And Brent, would you like to elaborate on your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it, Gennady. Yeah, Neal, essentially my perspective is that if your church and your religion, the creed that you defined earlier, makes it explicitly clear that life extension research is a very major aspect of your religion. And so if the FDA were to try to regulate or continue to regulate efforts to achieve these types of goals, would you perceive this as being persecutory?
Well, Brent, I would have to say I would take a completely different look at this. I think we've just saw the vaccine for this COVID-19 pandemic get sped through the FDA. It's this speedy way to get it out there. So I think we need to look at aging in the same way. We need to get a cure for the disease of aging in a speedy way. I would hold that the FDA needs to really redefine itself and revamp itself. It needs to streamline things. People who are 80, 90 years old, aging, that need the different things that they need. If someone has cancer and there's a theoretical way of curing the cancer, they should have the opportunity to access that technology. And with the speedy way that we came up with these vaccines, we need to look at many other things in that same way. So this may be, again, another one of those silver linings that comes from COVID-19, from this pandemic, maybe a loosening of the regulations toward things that we see that are good. Many years ago, Bill Falloon and his organization, one of his organizations, said that metformin could be a great thing for people to reverse their aging. It could be good for their health wise. But another thing that has come from that is it appears that taking metformin will also stave off many different forms of cancer. So just now there are trials that are being used for metformin in these things, and there are so many other things that we can look at using artificial intelligence to figure out, to repurpose what different drugs can be used for curing cancer or for reversing aging. So I'd hate to really pick a fight with the federal government. Instead, I think what we need to do is get people in the FDA and in the federal government on board with the concept of classifying aging as a disease and then finding a cure for it. And I think I see things working in that way. I see things coming that way. I think you're going to see some major changes and shifts in the FDA over the next 5 years. I certainly hope so. But the FDA in the past has done some awful things for humanity. Just what was it, maybe 20 years or so ago, when they were having the battles with stem cells, they didn't want to do stem cell research. Well, what happens is we have a vacuum then in the US, and places like China and other places are then doing this research, and they're way ahead, light years ahead of where we could be. So we need to keep our focus on common sense things. And I believe that we've seen some things, we've made mistakes in the past. I think we're going to learn from those mistakes, and we're going to do better things in the future. I see a revamped FDA in our future.
Yes, I certainly hope so, Neal. And we in the U.S. Transhumanist Party have been advocating for major FDA reforms. Indeed, we've gone so far as to organize demonstrations in the DC area through our Director of Scholarship, Dan Elton, essentially urging the FDA to more speedily approve the remaining vaccines that are being reviewed. Now, in particular, the AstraZeneca vaccine, of which there are millions of doses that are just sitting around, and the FDA has no plans to get around to reviewing the application for emergency use authorization until about April. So there are still some lags, but I definitely agree the FDA is moving faster in terms of vaccine reviews than it did prior to the pandemic. And of course, various longevity advocates and researchers have expressed the hope that perhaps the COVID-19 pandemic will trigger a recognition in the broader society that biological aging is the greatest risk factor and the reason why we have such devastating societal and economic consequences of this pandemic. Do you think, though, that this recognition is enough, that enough people have gotten the message at this time, or will other kinds of changes need to happen before it really sinks in and before it triggers the requisite reforms and accelerations of review processes outside the realm of vaccines?
Wow, that's really very difficult to say what's going to happen in the future and when it's going to happen. But there are so many people that are moving toward the concept of age reversal that I see that it's a wave that's building and building each year. More and more is happening. And when you look at what's going on entertainment-wise, you look at the different movies and TV shows that are in the different channels. There are a lot of transhumanist concepts out there that are being seen by more people, opening minds, creating a vision for the path that we can forge ahead with. The beautiful future that some of the Star Trek series shows where humanity can be. We need to, I think, introduce our ideas to those people in Hollywood so that they don't give those dismal, dark futures for us. They always love to give it a dark ending. And if we can encourage them to make positive endings and bright futures, then it will help our species, I think, get to those places. It'll show a path. It'll show the light to the way where we want to go. I know that's off topic, but I do think that we're headed in the right direction. I'd like to see that come faster, and I'd like to see changes come more quickly. But I think we need to do that which we need to do for ourselves to keep ourselves as young as possible, to keep ourselves as healthy as possible, so that we can catch the longevity escape velocity that I think will be within our grasp soon.
Yes, indeed. And you have mentioned an extremely important topic. Star Trek did actually arise earlier in the discussion today as well, but also in prior virtual enlightenment salons, we have spoken at great length about the importance of culture and art and film and shaping the perception of the general public about the future, about emerging technologies, about what this world would be like. And you're correct that it's unfortunate that dystopian science fiction is still quite prevalent. I think it's because it's easier to create a story with conflict in it. And it also feeds to a certain desire by a lot of say, movie creators to tell their audiences that perhaps the world they're living in, despite all of its troubles, is not that bad compared to having killer robots attack them or being in some sort of cyberpunk dystopia. And yet, of course, that does essentially negatively predispose people toward technological advancement. So having more techno-optimistic, future positive science fiction is essential in order to get more people to sympathize with the transhumanist cause. So I do see a great role for venues like the Church of Perpetual Life in terms of highlighting recent creations, works of art, literature, films that do promote this more positive techno-optimistic mindset.
Yes, we have to keep on that. I know that a cryonicist met with Leonard Nimoy one time, Mr. Spock, and it appears that he was interested in the concept of cryonic suspension. It's unfortunate. I don't believe that he took part in it. I don't think he got involved in it. Of course, with both the Cryonics Institute and Alcor, if someone of celebrity status decides to sign up and be cryopreserved with the hopes of being reanimated at a future point in time, that's something that they're very quiet about. So it's possible that he and others that we don't know about, famous people, are simply quiet about it. But it's when someone's at the end of their life, that's the last chance that they have. It's something that they should jump into. It's something, it's a chance that they have. Even if it's 1 in a million, it's a chance. I think that chance may be greater than that, given some research that's come out in the past 4 or 5 years. But regardless, it's another topic, but it's something that's worthy of our exploration.
Mm-hmm. And certainly cryonics has been a main subject of conversation for several of our prior virtual enlightenment salons. We had Rudy Hoffman on to discuss some of the financial planning aspects of cryonics. We had Greg Fay on to discuss not cryonics, but cryobiology and what scientists are and are not yet able to do today. We had a conversation with Ashwin DeWolf, a fairly extensive virtual enlightenment salon where we delved into many of the detailed considerations involved with cryopreservation. Now, also, I do think it is important to advance the science of cryonics and to ensure that there is less damage in the preservation process, that there is some easier reversibility of cryopreservation, as well as the ability to scale up cryopreservations to the point where they can become the third main option, for instance, for funeral directors to offer to people, so that alongside seeing burial and cremation as options, people could see cryonics. And if the cost of cryopreservation can be brought down to the cost of a typical funeral even, I think millions of people at the very least will be inclined to elect that for the very reason that you articulate, that there could be even a very small chance, which is better than 0% chance for someone who is buried or cremated.
Yes, there's that quote every time a person dies, a library of books are burned. You know, it's an awful loss of wisdom, an awful loss of information, and the person's gone. We had Martine Rothblatt, when she gave a talk at the church, one of the things she said was, it's surprisingly inexpensive to sign up for a life insurance policy to cover your cryonic suspension. For the cost of a cup of coffee a day, you can be covered for a cryonic suspension. And the younger you are, the less it's going to cost you over time. So I'm glad that Rudy was here to speak with you. Of course, he's got his great book, The Affordable Immortal. And we have a couple of those at our library also. Rudy's such a dynamic guy. He's great to be around. And I'm glad he was here with you. But yes, anyone who is even remotely interested in there it is. David has the book. But anyone who's even remotely a little bit interested in cryonics should certainly explore that possibility, whether it's for themselves or for an elder in their family or their family of loved ones. They should try to help those people to be able to reach out and get that as an option. It's there for a reason. And if someone's at the end of their life, then they should get that opportunity. I had a member of our church who's older and facing a fatal disease. Maybe he has another year, maybe he has another 2 years left, but here's a man, perfect example, a person who is signed up with one of the cryonic organizations, and he wishes that he could go to a place where he could, when he's been told that he only has a week left, rather than sit in a hospice bed and be frozen, or I shouldn't say frozen, but suspended at the end, he'd like to be transitioned into the state of suspension when he knows he only has a week or two left. Current laws don't allow that, but I guess there are places in the world where that may be available. There are certain island nations in the Caribbean that are more lax with their rules on these things, perhaps, and perhaps there could be a place where that could be arranged for this person. But I'd love to see the rules on assisted suicide loosened up throughout the country so that that can be an option for people if they want to be put into a frozen state, into a state of suspended animation. Going directly into that state will give them a much better chance than if they have to go through a different route. So perhaps we'll see that as well. Hey.
So we have a lot of questions now in our chat, and I will pose the question from Zach Richardson. What do you think about making use of the protections afforded in the US for a devout belief in technological immortality? I think he's referring to some of the protections afforded to churches through the Internal Revenue Code, for instance.
Well, I think that you shouldn't necessarily go to a church to shelter yourself using the church as a shelter from income tax. I think there are other ways to shelter your income. You shouldn't really join those two things. We are a legitimate church, but we do stand for life. We stand for all forms of life and any way to perpetuate life into an unlimited state. So I would say that there are certain things that we can say at the Church of Perpetual Life. Our members can have cards if they're cryonicists. I have my wallet here. Let me show you a card that I carry around in my wallet next to my license. And this is a thing that says, I am a religious objector to autopsy. I don't want to be autopsied because if something should happen, I'm signed up for cryonic suspension. So our members of the Church of Perpetual Life can be religious objectors to pulling the plug or anything. If we want to try to live forever, then I think we need to do everything we can within our possibilities of doing that. If a person, however, is not a cryonicist and they want to donate their organs to other people, that's great. That's a wonderful thing. That's a personal choice that they make. I personally want to see myself back in this body with as many of my faculties as possible in the future if something should happen to me. But frankly, Gennady, I do have faith that that's not going to happen. That's simply what I see as a life insurance policy. I simply see humanity finding the way to have an unlimited lifespan, to reverse our aging. We're going to do that. It's going to happen.
Yes, and I certainly believe that there's a realistic possibility of it happening within our lifetimes, and that a lot of the outcome, whether or not that possibility materializes, will depend on our individual efforts as well as the broader society embracing the defeat of biological aging as a desirable goal and dedicating resources toward achieving that goal. Now, Brent, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with a lot of your optimism. In my core, I feel as though these things are around the corner, but I think that it's, that the word that you used there was faith. And I think that that's, acutely definitive of this optimism, is that this is a faithful, wishful perspective. So if we look at like the CCR5 genetic expression and the Berlin patient, and how this has been identified as a way to not only prevent, but to cure HIV virus. I don't know if you are all familiar with this, but where is it? I've got friends of mine who are doctors and work on HIV and AIDS research, and I brought this up to them, and they experienced, my one friend, I brought it up to him, and he flipped out on me, and he was like, "Oh, you think that it would just be this easy?" And I started showing him information, and he refused to talk to me after the fact. And so what I'm getting at is, essentially, you have this card in your pocket. My uncle has a card in his pocket, and it says that he's a part of the Native American church, and it allows him to carry peyote. And this card was upheld by a federal trial in the Supreme Court in 2005 that said that this is a way to go about this. Why is there, is there opposition in the Church of Perpetual Life to go through similar processes and be able to have the permission, essentially, which, in my opinion, based on, constitutional interpretation, I think that permission already exists. But, in my opinion, I see that any efforts to prevent these types of technologies from coming into fruition as quickly as possible, considering the fact that every single person that dies, like you said, that is a library of knowledge. So why are we allowing these archaic, persecutory, extensions of the government to tell us what we can or cannot do in relation to our religious beliefs?
Sure. Well, one thing I'd like to bring to the front is that our church, the Church of Perpetual Life, is all about an unlimited lifespan. It's all about looking at life as a sacred thing. But when you look at other churches, any of the Christian denominations, Jewish religion, Islam, Buddhism, all of those also see it the same way. They see life as being something basically that is sacred. It's a fundamental, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. These are the fundamental beliefs that we hold in this country, and that we espouse. So we have good company there. I think that what we'll see happening once more people become aware of transhumanist thought and transhumanist concepts and the whole desire for the Church of Perpetual Life to make life unlimited, once people see that it's, number one, possible, and number two, a great thing, not just possible, but something that's good. Some people think, okay, maybe you can do that, but should you? Yeah, of course you should. But they don't see that, they haven't gone through the questions that we all have. We've gone through a process of accepting that it's possible, expecting that it should come, and all the reasons, we know those reasons why it's a good thing. Other people need to be educated toward that. And when all of humanity, starting, I think, with this country in the United States, when Europe, when Australia, when the masses realize it's possible and it's a good thing, I think that's when people get on board and we make it happen. The governments are going to follow that which the masses are asking for. So these things are going to come next. Anytime a government or any organization says a life being unlimited is a bad thing, we can counter that. We have the arguments for that. We have the reasons that we can explain to people why it's not. And it's just a matter, I think, of education. That's the big thing that we have to do. And all of us, we're all ambassadors to our own concepts of what we need to do. We need to, and if your families are anything like my families, my families, they don't like hearing me talk about it all the time, but you have to find the right time to talk with somebody about it. You can't push it on them. You can't push it, if somebody is not going to accept it, they're not going to accept it. It's a horrible thing, but there are some people just want to die. They want to die. Some people believe in some afterlife or some fairy tale concept that you're going to either come back to life or you'll be reincarnated or something's going to happen to you. And that's something that they believe in because they don't believe that you can possibly live to be 200, 300, 500, an unlimited lifespan. So to push that pain away, they think of, well, maybe there's a heaven and that's what's going to happen. Or maybe my great grandfather, who I loved so much, well, he's in some heaven, some magical place. They have to cut the ties with that and let that go in order to embrace the concept of creating heaven here on earth for us to be able to find the unlimited lifespan. So it's a learning curve for humanity. It's a place that we're way ahead of, and we have to tell them, we have to train them, we have to teach them, we have to educate people. One, that is possible, and two, that it's a good thing, and all the other things will come into place.
I appreciate it. Yeah, my thought though, just hearing that, is that if you look at every other religion, you know, the fundamentalists of the religion kind of all have a similar sentiment that everyone else is going to get on board. And as you stated, when I talk to to my parents, my friends about this kind of stuff, they call me a cultist, and they tell, they don't want to hear anything about it. And so, if we're going to again define our actions around faith, why are we defining our actions around the faith in which that everybody else is going to eventually agree with us? And why not the faith in which this is what we're doing, and that we live in a country where we're lucky enough to be protected at a federal level to be able to pursue in those directions? I just think that it's an opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that we should push our faith in perpetual life on everybody. That doesn't work. I think that eventually people are going to catch up with the concept, and they're going to say, well, yeah, I do want to live. I don't want to die. And what we're going to do ultimately, I think, is outlive the deathists. And as we do, they're going to be dropping off, and those of us who are immortalists, I call ourselves, because we aspire to attain immortality or an unlimited lifespan, we're simply going to live beyond that, and we're going to get beyond that. I think that's what's going to happen. But unfortunately, things change slowly, and we may see rapid progression, we may see a slow progression, but so long as I'm sort of selfish about this, but I want to live. I don't want to die. So I want us to be able to attain an unlimited lifespan within my lifespan and within all of yours. I want it to be there with you. So the more people that we can talk to about this, I think the faster we'll get to that point. I think maybe Jason has a question.
Yeah, I was wondering if, let's say it works out and we get super longevity, and you and I are 300 and we know we're going to live till 1,000, well, what do you want to do then?
I love life. I just want to continue living a great life. I love, stories. I love reading books. I love watching the movies. I love playing games. I love doing all of the things that technology allows. That's a wonderful thing. 100 years ago, we couldn't fly a plane. I mean, 120 years ago, that wasn't available to us. But that one simple thing, it would be great. To fly to Mars would be a fantastic thing if we can get a colony on Mars and to be able to visit that. Use that as our vacation. Our vacations can go from 2 weeks to a month to years at a time, perhaps. It's a bright future that we have. So there are many things that are in our way, but we will find ways to get past those things. There are people that may be in our way, but when we can explain to them, when we can show them why what we are talking about is ultimately good for us, good for our species, good for humanity, good for the planet, then ultimately, I think people will more often be joining with our causes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that is a wonderful vision of the future. I like to present an example to help people understand why we will never run out of ways to use our time. There are now about 2,500 books published every single day in the world. And even if one were a very fast reader and could read one book per day, or even accelerate one's reading through some sort of neural augmentation. Well, the people publishing the books will also have the neural augmentation, so they will produce books at an even faster rate. And so you will never run out of content to read. And that's just one dimension of life. There are all of the other dimensions as well, some of which you mentioned, that people can choose to invest their time in. So no matter how long we live, not only will we not run out of things to do, but the number of opportunities we haven't pursued will continue to exceed the number of opportunities that we have pursued.
Yes, Gennady, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what we will learn. 120 years ago, the head of the US Patent Office wrote a letter, a statement saying, everything that will ever be invented has been invented already. We should just close the patent office. 120 years ago, but amazing how some people can think that way. But what amazing technologies will be there in 50 years or 100 years? I want to be there. I want to be there when all these wonderful things will be available, and it's going to be a beautiful world. It's going to be a great life.
Yes, indeed. So now let us go to some of the panelists who haven't had the opportunity to ask a question yet. Art Ramon, what would you like to ask Neal?
I was raised Catholic and not so much interested in religion anymore. So someone like me who's hesitant to get involved with anything that kind of sounds like religion, I mean, how can you help me get past that? Because I really have no interest in religion or anything that sounds like religion. I used to associate with the Satanic Temple, but even they have become officially a religion. So how can you help me out?
Okay, so at the Church of Perpetual Life, we are both a non-denominational and what I would call ourselves a supplemental church. I was also raised Catholic, Art, and I'd like to say that within the church, we have many members who are atheist or agnostic, Christian, Buddhist, Jewish, many different things. I don't want to get bogged down in the concepts really that are bogged that stay bogged down with some of the houses of religion, some of the different churches. They're fighting about, well, this and that, and it's so important for us to stay above that fray, offering people a light toward a possible unlimited lifespan, what the future will hold. Ultimately, where I see humanity going is embracing some other forms than what we have. If you look in the past 2,000 years, you had Jupiter or Zeus. That used to be the main god, with all the other minor gods and goddesses that were worshipped. In different places in the world, you had different gods and goddesses that were worshipped. Now you have primarily Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. These are the primary religions. But we are a species that evolve. We evolve different methods of thought, philosophy and theosophy and religions that will complement our view of the world. 2,000 years ago, we didn't maybe know that the world was a globe. We didn't know what caused thunder. And, we can't stop trying to learn things. We can't stop trying to find things out. The Church of Perpetual Life should be an open and welcoming place for you, Art. If you haven't seen any of our services, you're going to find that it's very different than many of the other services of other churches. It's quite a different thing. But I say it's a supplemental church because anyone who is Christian or Buddhist or Jewish, you can stay within that church and still become a member of the Church of Perpetual Life. You can still be an atheist and be a great member and join the Church of Perpetual Life. It doesn't require you to give up anything. In fact, anything that is added, anytime a new member comes to the church, whatever background they have, that adds to the fabric of the church and makes us a more beautiful and wonderful place and group, family, if you will.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
And I think that speaks to a lot of the conversation we previously had about the importance of transhumanists and life extension advocates remaining inclusive and non-dogmatic, having this big tent approach that is compatible with a large variety of persuasions, because if we seek to convince the general public of the benefits of pursuing the research and deploying the treatments to reverse biological aging, we do need to speak to people of many different perspectives. And David, I know you had some thoughts on this that you previously expressed, so this is a good bridge with regard to your questions and comments for Neal.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big tent kind of guy. It's one of the things that attracts me to the Transhumanist Party specifically, but also broader to transhumanism and the immortalist communities. I really appreciate what I see going on at the Church of Perpetual Life, but I also love all the other different expressions of transhumanism and immortalists that are around the country and express themselves here virtually as well. So I loved your comment about when a new member comes in with whatever their background is, how that adds to the richness of the fabric of the church. And I see that in transhumanism especially. I consider myself a Christian transhumanist, and there are Buddhist transhumanists, and there are atheist transhumanists, and then there are just a wide variety of things. So I love this this complementary idea, but I also value sometimes the fact that we might have contra viewpoints. And that's okay too, because that also adds to the richness of what's going on. Nobody has a corner on the market for what's the right way to go about this. I say, let's push on all of them. And in the end, we'll look back and go, yeah, that was a pretty good one. And we like that. So I'll see you at your 500th birthday party.
Great. Yes, that's absolutely right, David. Great. I look forward to seeing you there. And of course, before that as well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we really appreciate the work that the Church of Perpetual Life is doing, and I think our audience members appreciate it as well. I think when we had the conversation about what is or isn't a religion prior to this discussion, it may be important to follow in the footsteps of what the IRS is doing, incidentally, and distinguish a church from a religion, because a church in the IRS definition can be much broader, and it doesn't necessitate any particular set of beliefs, but rather it is a gathering place in essence. So the IRS says a church is any recognized place of worship regardless of its adherence, faith, or religious belief. And this is where an organization like the Church of Perpetual Life can come in and encompass many different strains of belief, and can be a church, even maybe not religious as the traditional notion of religion would hold, but something broader than that, something more inclusive than that, more capable of accommodating both religious and non-religious perspectives.
Yes. You know, when you look at our forefathers, I think you see people like Ben Franklin, who was perhaps our first cryonicist. He wanted to be preserved with a group of his friends to see what the future might hold, and spoke to that, but also spoke to the fact that he thought he kind of knew he was in an era where that would not be possible, but someday it would be, alluding to cryonics. Also, Abraham Lincoln, one of a great American, perhaps the greatest president we've had. To quote Abraham Lincoln, he said, "Surely God would not have created such a being as man with an ability to grasp the infinite to exist only for a day. No, man was made for immortality." Then there are so many wonderful quotes from different people when people realize that other people wanted what we have, but were in a position, in an era where they couldn't be living an unlimited life. We have it. We have the opportunity, I think, in our lifetime to catch the longevity, escape velocity, to catch an unlimited lifespan. When so many people, the pharaohs of Egypt, they mummified themselves in some radical quest to try to reach another time. Other people, the crazy emperor of China, was drinking the mercury, trying to preserve himself into the future. It was always there. The quest was always there. The desire is there. I think the desire is inherent in the human being that loves life, that loves to live life. We want to live an unlimited lifespan. And when people see that it's a possibility, that's when people become involved. That's when they become active in pursuing the research and supporting the research, and the researchers doing the great work that they're doing. So we have to continue that and continue to tell our friends and neighbors and family and all of the people we know that that's available. I know, Brent, was it you that said that people think that this is a cult? Basically, the definition of a cult is that it's a small group of people that believe something that is not believed by the mainstream. Well, perhaps we're a small group, but we're growing. And it's something that I think that will catch on. Well, I know that will catch on and will continue to grow. So we will go from being considered by some people a cult to being mainstream. And that's when we'll see great action and great things happen by our species.
Yes, and I do think it's also worthwhile to consider what distinguishes even, say, mainstream religions from cults, because I do think that there's a difference, and the difference isn't just in terms of how long the particular system or set of organizations have been in existence. I think it's also a matter of how people within that system or set of organizations approach the outside world and approach ideas. So you can be a Christian or a Jew or a Buddhist, and you can live in a world with people who do not share those beliefs, and yet you can function within a broader society and have exchanges of value interactions that are mutually beneficial with all those other people. Cults tend to be very exclusivist. They tend to limit their members from associating with others who are of different mindsets, and they tend to essentially try to urge their members to live apart from the rest of the society and to submit to the cult leaders as their exclusive sources of meaning and purpose. And what that leads to, of course, can sometimes be quite tragic. And I do not see that at all in transhumanism, because we transhumanists aren't saying at all that you should reject the outside world or people who don't adhere to transhumanism. It would be a rather foolish injunction if anyone tried it, given that transhumanists are also spread out geographically. So we have to interact with the majority of people who don't share our views right now. And there is absolutely no restriction within any transhumanist organization that I know of from joining other organizations, be they religious denominations, as you mentioned, Neal, or political parties. So you can be a member of the Transhumanist Party and a member of any other political party. We don't limit people in that way. And what honest cult would be able to credibly make the same kinds of statements that I've just made? I don't think it's possible to be a cult and to have that kind of outlook vis-a-vis the external world. And I'll generalize that to the broader life extension community. I don't see life extensionists saying, well, you just shouldn't associate with anyone who doesn't hold this as a goal. That again would be foolish and counterproductive, especially if we do want to persuade more people that these are worthwhile objectives.
Gennady, I always appreciate what a wonderful speaker you are and what great thoughts you bring forward and how eloquent you are with your thoughts. I appreciate that. That's very well put. Another thing within the cult, the leader at the top of a cult will tell all of the other individuals what to believe, what to think, what to do, and what's going to happen. Whereas with the Church of Perpetual Life, members of the Church of Perpetual Life all have individual ideas of how to attain an unlimited lifespan. We don't have a set path. So many different people are on different paths to go there. And each individual person has a different biology. So while maybe it's okay for me to take metformin, maybe it's not good for Brent to take metformin. And we all have to take care of our own health and be our own doctors in that way.
Yes, indeed. Jason, it looks like you wanted to make a statement in this regard.
Yeah, there's a doctor named Steve Hassan that has a Freedom of Mind Resource Center. He's a occult expert. And one of the things that our hallmark is this idea of undue influence. And you mentioned some of the other steps to the brainwashing, and which one is limiting their access to outside thing. But the first step is usually fear. That's why I call it fear-based manipulation tactics. It's usually the first step. And I have, from your church, I have seen none of that. You haven't. And I've wondered about it because, it's about perpetual life, so it probably might be easy to use fear of death as a motivator to get people to join, but don't seem to be doing that, which is good, because part of occult tactics are using undue influence, namely fear-based manipulation tactics. So I'm glad to see that you're not doing that.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Yes, that's a good point. We don't focus on the fear of death. We focus on the hope for unlimited life, and then that's where we will continue to keep our focus. Thank you.
Yes. So Neal, with regard to your experience from the onset of the Church of Perpetual Life to the kind of organization that it is today, what advice or lessons would you have with regard to building an effective community? And how does it happen over time? What approaches tend to work well? What approaches perhaps don't work as effectively in achieving that goal?
Well, the first thing I'll say is never give up, never quit. You may be just inches away from success when you're working on a project. Don't quit, burst through there, and whatever that obstacle is, the success may just be inches away. So never quit. Keep at it. The Church of Perpetual Life tends to be an organization where I think at every one of our services, I find that people come in when it's their first time. They're a little bit skeptical. They're not sure what's going to happen. They're a little bit wary. But once they've experienced the service, they come away saying, "Oh, this was great. I'm going to tell everybody about this, and I'm going to be back again." And that's how we grow. I think is through our members. Getting with the members that you have now, and expanding in that way by reaching out to the members and constantly being in communication with your members. What you offer, the Transhumanist Party offers, are some remarkable concepts that need to be explored, that need to be seen, people need education. People need to know that the Transhumanist Party exists. And that's the main thing that you have to overcome, I think. For the Church of Perpetual Life, the same really existed. We had to get out there. We had to get people to know that we were there. And some of the things that happened for us, we just, Motherboard Vice came and did a documentary on the church, and that springboarded to many other different things that happened. And anytime that we get certain media attention, we tell people the way it is, and they either give us a good slant or a bad slant. But I think no news going on, no conversation is the worst thing. Even conversation in a negative light will bring our concepts to people, where people will open their mind a little bit and say, "What? It's possible maybe to be cryonically suspended, or what? It may be possible to live to be 500 years old, I need to learn more about that. It opens the minds of people so that they can see beyond what their current trend of thought may be, what the current status of our species is. We got to live way beyond 100 years, and we've got to be healthy at 200 years of life. And when the more that that's expressed, the more that that's conversed, the more education and those things that can happen, the better our species will be and our society will grow from.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Neal. Those are quite astute observations. And indeed, the challenge for the transhumanist movement is one of gaining additional exposure, additional awareness, and recognition from the public. But the fortunate part of that is we can control much of that and how it happens and how we are perceived by means of our actions. And as long as we in the transhumanist movement behave according to our principles, forwarding our ideals and our goals, with indefinite life extension being foremost among them, I think any criticism, any negative coverage that we receive can be readily addressed using logic and rational argument and empirical evidence. The only kind of bad publicity, I think, is the publicity that stems from bad behavior. And that's why I do think it's important to make sure we don't have any bad actors within our movement, the people who can legitimately be criticized for what they do. But if we're criticized for what we consider to be noble and worthwhile pursuits, we can always defend that. And in the course of defending that, we do attract more notice and hopefully more sympathy among those members of the public who understand the value of what we are doing and understand the rational case for pursuing it.
Yes.
So now we come to the point in our virtual Enlightenment Salon where we will go to each one of our panelists with any of their closing remarks or any final questions that they may have for you. And then, as is our custom, we will offer our guests the last word. So let us now go to Brent.
Thank you, Gennady, and thank you very much, Neal, for everything that you've been sharing with us. Really great to connect here. Yeah, just kind of just like a perspective of mine that I would want to share is that I feel like with religion, especially when we feel as though what we're doing is the right thing and that there's nobility to our action, I think that sometimes it may almost be better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. I don't think that's always the case, but I think that, like you said, it's healthy to be our own doctor with some of these things and to experiment on our own. And I just kind of come to this conclusive perspective that if I have this, I'm going to die eventually unless we can do something about it. And if we're going to wait for the FDA to approve longevity efforts, isn't that kind of like waiting for heaven?
Well, yeah,
But
you don't want to have to wait for things. I think that what we're seeing within our church, our many members are, as I said, they're taking different paths, they're doing different things, experimenting on different possible technologies. Let's continue doing that. Let's not wait. Waiting for someone else to do something for us is not going to be the way to succeed with what we need to do. We all need to be active, as active as possible to save our lives.
And I think the kind of activity that is also does depend on the individual and what that individual's current condition is. For instance, people who are younger and healthier already, who might live for another 20 or 30 years with no serious health conditions, even if they don't do anything, they might be fine with taking a more cautious approach, whereas somebody who is more advanced in years or who has certain health conditions already. If that person doesn't do anything, then that person's health might go downhill very fast. So for those people, it makes more sense to take a more active role in, say, trying various experimental treatments because the benefits could outweigh any potential negative side effects. So it's a question that every person should think about. And indeed, sometimes the FDA hasn't approved treatments that are fully legal and even available to the general public in other countries. Metformin, for example, is an over-the-counter drug in many European countries as well as in Mexico. So somebody who thinks metformin might have an age reversal benefit or a slowing down of aging effect, which is more likely, they could in those countries purchase metformin over the counter and try it, whereas in the US they'd need to persuade a doctor and get a prescription. And again, they'd have to consider their individual situations in those cases, but I am overwhelmingly in favor of the freedom of individuals to do their own research and make their own decisions. So
Absolutely.
Now let us go to Art Ramon. Art Ramon, any questions or comments?
Well, yeah, thanks for coming and thanks for your insight. I'm hoping to not only live long, one day I want to actually run up Mount Everest without stopping. At the moment, I had to quit running because my hips are gone. So, yeah, I'm definitely looking for that brighter transhumanist future. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, and now let's go to David Shoemaker.
Yes, hi, and thanks again, Neal, for coming. I guess I'll address that topic too of individual responsibility, because I think that's what it comes down to, is accepting for yourself how you're going to, if you want to live a long time, then do something about it. I don't like the idea of sitting and waiting for the bus necessarily to come along. I guess that's one of the reasons why we participate in these salons and we talk to as many people as we can and appear and try to do something while I look for longevity, escape velocity in my lifetime. I'm very fortunate to live in the 21st century and not back with my idol or one of my fans, or being a fan of Ben Franklin as well. But the point is, I love the fact for those who get involved and continue to push towards the goal. And the Church of Perpetual Life certainly fills a need for that, and you help the people that are there with that, and that is just amazing. And keep on keeping on. Susan and I look forward to coming and visiting in person one of these days and not always needing to drop in virtually. So keep on with the good fight.
Well, thank you, David. And we're always happy to have you virtually, and certainly look forward to the future when you can come in person. And to just jump on that, if you do nothing, that guarantees you're going to die. So do something that can find the way to reverse aging.
All right, thank you, David and Neal. And now we go to Jason Gehringer.
Yeah, I was wondering, you mentioned that earlier, that problem about when you're going to cryopreserve somebody, having to wait until they actually die to do it. And if there was some better way, I'm wondering if it would be more beneficial to come at the problem from a perspective of a political party, or would it be better to come at it from the perspective of a religion or a church? Is there some way where we can say that we don't believe this person is dead until they're failed to get revived? So it's just a procedure. They're not really dead until. Do you think there's?
Yes, I think it's. Yes, Jason. I think it takes both. Right now the laws require a person to be pronounced legally dead before they can go into a cryonic suspension. But I think if we can change the laws, and gradually they will change, then certain people can get better cryopreservations. From a religious standpoint, that certainly can be looked at as well. but ultimately, I think there are places to get the best cryopreservation. There are communities near the two leading institutions, the Cryonics Institute and Alcor. There are places where people can go there. It is suggested to them that if they know that they've got only a month or two left, or that they're in dwindling health, perhaps they should relocate to those areas where they can get a quicker, better cryonic suspension. Again, I look at cryonics as a means of life insurance. I don't think that I'm going to partake in it, but I have it in case I hit that bus or have something happen to me, that's there as a life insurance policy. But I've always had the idea that maybe we should have a country in the Caribbean that would be cryonic friendly, where people could actually fly there so that they can go into that place. And it's not against the law of that country, where that country would support them in their transition from a living state to a suspended state to be in the hopes of being reanimated. Different places like Montserrat or different countries, maybe that can be created, and it would be an option, sort of a place where we can go now, so that if it happens that 25 or 50 years from now the laws change, those people that require the services of that state of going from living to chronic suspension can go and access that there. I don't know if that can happen, but hopefully maybe someday it will, and maybe sometime soon.
So thank you, Neal, for those responses, and thank you to all of our panelists and attendees for your questions. Yes, please.
One more thing. I wanted to say and stress the fact that those of you who are atheists don't see Christians or Jews or people who are theistic, don't see them as the enemy. They can be your friend. They can be they can help you get to where we are now, to a better place. Those of you who are Christian don't see the atheist as the enemy or the agnostic as the enemy. We're all in this together. There's a quote in the Bible that I like to look at, and it is of great value. And also that quote from Benjamin Franklin I wanted to share with you before I go. The quote is 1 Corinthians, "For our earthly bodies, the ones we have now that can die, must be transformed into heavenly bodies that cannot perish, but will live forever. When this happens, then at last, this scripture will come true. Death is swallowed up in victory." I think what happened, for thousands of years, the people that wrote the Bible, the people that lived by the Bible, they were always looking for a way to live an unlimited life, to live forever. They didn't want to die, but they didn't have the scientific possibility. They didn't have the direction to be able to live an unlimited lifespan. We are blessed in that way. We are in a time where we're within reach of living an unlimited lifespan, so we can't let that go. We have to continue working toward that. And I wanted to give the quote of Benjamin Franklin, the first cryonicist. He said, "I wish it were possible to invent a method of embalming drowned persons in such a manner that they might be recalled to life at any period. I should prefer to an ordinary death, being immersed with a few friends in a cask of Madeira until that time, than to be recalled to life by the solar warmth of my dear country. But in all probability, we live in a century too little advanced and too near the infancy of science to see such an art brought in our time of its perfection." So the great grandfather of cryonics was really Benjamin Franklin, the first person to consider the possibility. So I thank you, Gennady, for having me today.
Yes, thank you, Neal, for joining us, and also for sharing these quotations. Our movement does have a lot of eminent forebears, people who were ahead of their time in recognizing the desirability of overcoming biological aging and death through technological means. And we really appreciate your work in bringing public attention to these ideas and in growing our movement in the way that the Church of Perpetual Life has certainly done over the past now 8 years. It's astonishing how quickly time advances, but we hope the Church of Perpetual Life will itself be perpetual in its existence, and will have a lot more to look forward to. And these are the kinds of conversations that we really want to foster through our virtual Enlightenment salons. I hope that our audience continues to check back with us weekly